Hello, and welcome to our video recording today, Beyond the Audit and How to Build a High-Performing Digital Ecosystem. My name is Dan Drury. I'm a middle-aged, balding guy with thick-rimmed green spectacles and a light blue denim shirt. And the reason I'm here today is to tell you about my experience working with many of the world's largest companies, the Fortune Global 500, and what I've learned from their digital governance practices and how to make a great web experience for all of their visitors. One of the people I met along my journey is Maya Sellen, and I met her at Shell, who I've worked with for many, many years as a consultant. And Maya has been leading their digital inclusivity for the past 6 years now. She's recently left the company at the start of this year, but she has got a wealth of experience on how to implement digital inclusion at large organizations. Maya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you for the intro, Dan. So I'm Maya Sellen. I've got brown eyes, a short haircut with the top bleached white, and today I'm wearing a short sleeve gray t-shirt because it's very warm in London, and I think the heat might be affecting me a little bit. But I worked in digital for a little over 20 years, and the last 3 quarters of have been dedicated to digital accessibility and inclusive design. And I will be the first to admit I do not know everything. I'm learning new things all the time. And in my experience, it is not a solo venture. It really is a sport, and the wider team, the structure and the org that you work with can make a huge difference. But today, we're not here just to talk about patching leaks. We want to talk to you about how you can take control and accountability in your digital ecosystem. So, hopefully, some good tips for you today.
I'm sure you will have many good tips for us. Let me just run you through the agenda and the objectives of this video today. We want to really call out the specific challenges that very large, complex, typically global organizations face. Then we're going to explore what we call the governance gap. And I'm going to use an example of a group of companies known as the Valuable 500. And I'm going to show you some tools throughout this presentation that could be useful on your digital inclusion journey. Finally, we're going to wrap up with some good advice and hopefully useful takeaways on how you're going to overcome those challenges and, most importantly, close the governance gap. Because, as Maya just said, it is a team sport. And in my experience, successful web estates are all about good governance, not so much the technology or the individuals. So, moving on. I'd like Maya to talk us through today's challenges and explain how she needed to reframe the problem and also bust some common myths.
Thanks, Dan. So, when we're talking about reframing things, I think part of what is important to move away from is from this idea of accessibility or it being um, the specialist's job. So it's one team or one person, and talk more about inclusive design and designing for everybody, because inclusive design is good for business, both within the business, but also expanding your market reach. And in order to do this efficiently and effectively, as I said, it's a team sport. So everybody needs to play a role in it. And there is a role for everybody within inclusive design. Um, and if I expand on that a little bit and we talk about the myths. So, one of the things is that people believe that it is that specialist role, or it's something that somebody else does. But if you think about it as everybody's role, one of those first myths that we can bust is that accessible sites, they're ugly. Well, maybe they're ugly because we haven't included the designers and gotten them to help actually design that site inclusively, um, or that it's too expensive to be accessible. But if we do it right the first time, all the way from research through production, we're only doing it once. It's part of everybody's role. It's not going to cost anything extra in order to make it accessible. And I've already said this, but accessibility isn't just for specialists. When you make it just for specialists and you tack it on at the end, it will be more expensive. And I have seen designs suffer for it. So if we all work together and build something that's inclusive, I've seen some really stunning designs come out.
Absolutely, and so have I. So let's move on to how we're going to help you solve and overcome some of these challenges. But first, I just want to show you the evidence of this governance gap. There's a group of companies known as the Valuable 500. I'm just going to switch to their website right now, and hopefully you can see that now on the screen. And this is more than 500 organizations who have signed up to a very specific mission, and it's to end disability exclusion, which is a great thing. And I'm delighted that these companies have done this. However, the evidence suggests that there's a gap between what they say they are doing and what they're actually doing. And I'm going to show you this by looking at a couple of scorecards, a couple of lists or rankings of the valuable 500 websites and how accessible they appear to be when using automated testing tools. And I know, Maya, that it's not all about automated testing tools, and we're going to come on to that later. After all, this video is all about beyond the audit. But what we're going to see right now is a ranking of these 500 sites just simply based on these automated tests, typically testing against the WCAG standards. So if you look at this donut chart right here, what we can see is that only a tiny fraction of the sites actually pass. Like, 1% are really good, 3% are pretty good, but really the majority are letting themselves down. And one of the reasons I really wanted to have Maya on this call and why I respect her so deeply in this field is because we can see right here that Shell is currently ranked number one with an A grade here. And congratulations also to Voya Financial and the Bank of England, who have also done a great job at getting a great score. But if we scroll down a little, what we find is we quickly run into some Bs. And it also highlights another issue we're going to touch on later, and that is things change. This is not a one and done exercise. You've really got to stay on top of this. And just picking out one example here of John Siskinson, we can see that they were failing for many months, and then in the last month, they've really hit their stride and they've gone green. So they've clearly been putting some effort into this over time, and we're going to come back to that topic later. But the sad news is that as we scroll down here, what we find is the B's become C's, and sadly, we then run into many, many D's. And I don't think I need to keep going to to show you the E's. So a lot of these companies, sadly, are not really living up to their promises. And just to show you it's not this one tool, here's another ranking of exactly the same valuable 500 sites. And yet again, we see Shell is number one. So that's great news for Shell. They've really committed themselves to getting this right. Although, interestingly, you might notice that the other positions in this league table are slightly different from the other ranking we were looking at. And this is just an example that not all these tools look at the same thing all the time. So that's just something to remember. One tool might pass something and another tool might not. So when we talk a little bit about tools later, that's just something to bear in mind. It's not about tools and it's not about just the audit, as we said at the top of the call. So back to the slides. We've given you the setup. And now what I want to talk to you about is where the current approach falls short. Maya, would you just pick up on that point that we began with, that it really isn't just about the audit?
Sure. It isn't just about the audit because the audit is a snapshot in time, I would say. And as you just showed all of us with those lovely dashboards, things shift. Especially in this day and age, there's always this continuous deployment, whether it's code or content being updated. So the landscape is constantly changing. And that's why continuous monitoring and that governance is so very important. And I think audits are a good place to start. I started there by myself, but by its nature, it creates that backlog of issues, which then creates a burden on the teams to address them. It's always more fun to work on new things than to go back and fix. So this is another reason why I would say if we embrace this idea of designing inclusively being part of everybody's role, it's not only just reducing that backlog of work, but it makes work more enjoyable for everybody, which makes things more productive. So I think it's just a win-win all around, really.
And just building on that, and one of the reasons I've used this particular visualization of the problem, um, there is a somewhat looming threat, the threat of everything overflowing, and that is the forthcoming European Accessibility Act, which is some new legislation this month that is going to mandate that companies start doing this well. We saw this come into force in the USA recently with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and many companies did start getting sued for their failure in this area. And I think we're going to start seeing that happen in Europe over the coming months and years. So just watch out. There is a sort of building and boiling problem behind all of this. And a lot of the problems are caused by that reliance solely on a one-off audit to tell you that you're okay or not. So moving on, I just wanted to talk a little bit about web estates. I said at the top, my particular area of expertise is dealing with companies that have got very complex global web estates. And what I mean by that really is they've probably got hundreds, maybe even thousands of websites. They have one in every country, probably several, lots of different languages, and all kinds of different products and brands and services and so on. And in my little iceberg picture here on the left, you can only fix what you know about. And most people will know they've got many hundreds of sites. But what a lot of companies don't know is they probably have double, triple, maybe even more, many times more sites than that. And therefore their risk comes from this real fragmentation and proliferation of websites that have popped up over time for lots of different reasons. It's very easy to create a website, and coming back to this governance issue, that's what you've got to get under control. You need to at least know the scale of your problem. And on the right-hand side of my slide here, I just wanted to call out a great little tool that I've come across called Little Forest. It helps you do domain discovery, and it helps you find all of your websites and then give them some basic auditing for things like accessibility, but also cookie audit, security, tags, all the other things that you might want to keep on top of. And actually, I think most importantly, you'll see a column here for the site owner. Who is actually the person accountable for this website is really important to know. And amazingly, lots of organizations out there don't know how many websites they have, and they don't know who's in charge of them. So, Maya, I just wanted to talk to you about the point you made at the beginning about reframing the conversation, and then talk us through how you would change that conversation with the organization you're working for. In your example at Shell, how did you get that conversation going and change the nature of people's view towards accessibility or digital inclusion, and how did you convince people to take action? And we saw the results. Shell's top of both of those lists. So you seem to do something right. What was it?
Um, well, I don't want to say I don't know exactly, but it does depend on who you're talking to. So I would say there's no one formula that you can use with everybody. It's really about adjusting to your stakeholder. But if we talk about business benefits to start, I like talking about brand reputation. If your site is accessible, your competition isn't, that differentiates you. And not only that, it builds that customer loyalty, and not just the customers who now can access your site, but all of their friends and family. So if we think about this, we're going from that 15% that we hear about very often from the WHO, which are, people in the world living with disabilities. That effect multiplies because it's not just the 15% anymore, it's all of their friends and family. And one of the other things I always like mentioning, something I heard many, many years ago in a conference, is Google, and now AI is the biggest blind user on the web. So if Google can access your website, that's your SEO, and you will bring customers to your website. So, did you want to add anything for the business benefits, Dan?
No, I think you really summed it up well there. I just think that people need to understand that there are a whole host of benefits of getting this right. And it really is not just about doing the right thing by people who have different disabilities and impairments. It's about not confusing people. It's about everybody, really. I mean, imagine a couple of these scenarios. You've broken your arm. If I broke my right hand, I wouldn't be able to use my mouse. I would struggle using the keyboard. That would lower my productivity, and I could probably really only function if I learned some of the great technology tools that exist, text to or speech to text and voice control. Imagine that you're a elderly person whose eyesight is failing and you can't read the tiny text and you can't quite hit those really tiny little touch targets on big mega menus. Imagine you're a young parent and you're just tired and you want it to be simple and quick and easy. I mean, making things better for everybody by focusing on some of the things that come under the heading of digital inclusion are just going to make things better for all. And I think it's going to make all of your visitors happy. So that's a huge benefit.
Absolutely. Um, I guess the question a lot of people have is, how do you actually get people to listen to you when you're talking about all of these benefits? And in these large mega corporations, I can't emphasize enough how critical it is to have senior sponsorship. You absolutely can go grassroots and speak to everybody, but having someone from the top saying this is important, listen to this person, uh, is incredibly important. And the larger your organization is, I'd say the more important it is. Um, and that's then when we go back to knowing your stakeholder, knowing what motivates them and what drives them, and speaking to them from that perspective. So, just very, very quickly, if you're speaking on a senior level, then some advice that I got from Christopher Patno, who's head of accessibility at Google Europe. He's mentioned that we have different types of CEOs, say, and you can very quickly be speaking about risk averse, which is speaking to them about what you already mentioned, Dan, ADA, the EAA coming up. But you may also have those who are motivated by new, exciting innovations, and then talk to them about the wonderful things that we've been seeing leaders in this space doing, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and get them excited and motivated about what can be achieved by designing inclusively. But to keep all of this momentum going, you really need to have that support system in place as well. I think a lot of people are very familiar with starting out as a team of one, a solo individual trying to pick this up off the ground. And if you're in a team, it's absolutely amazing. But if you're a solo practitioner, you really need that support system. So reach out to other team members, get them to understand what you're doing. Maybe have a day in the office where you offer free donuts and coffee, or fruit and water if you want to be more healthy. and build up that community where you can go and ask for advice, but also go and say, like, oh, I've just had a really tough week. Let's just blow off some steam, feel good, and talk about something good that happened. And that can really be a lifesaver when you feel like you're struggling on your own, to know that you're not. And these supports and the community that you build, it will help with integration. It's part of the business benefits, but until you integrate with the wider business, I think in my experience, you really struggle to realize those benefits. But I do promise you, I have seen over and over, the earlier you can integrate that inclusive thinking and inclusive way of designing into your process, the more time and money it saves and the more fun it will be.
Absolutely. And I think a key phrase that you may have heard or should certainly look up if you haven't is shift left. And that is all about bringing this kind of thinking right to the beginning of the conversation, involving all the stakeholders and the designers and the technology people and the marketers and the agency really at the beginning and saying, we're going to make this better. And if you do that, it will look great, it will cost less, and it will not take longer than it should do. And that's the vital thing. You've really got to, this governance issue is crucial, and it's all about shifting it left and integrating it into the business. So moving on to this slide, I just wanted to talk a bit about governance models because not all companies are the same. They have very different ways of organizing themselves and different business models. And I just called out four company examples that I know well. And we're on a scale here of centralized to decentralized. So a decentralized company is going to be someone like a Unilever. Yes, there's a corporate HQ that looks after branding and standards and compliance, but really the power in a company like Unilever is with the brands. So brands you're going to be really familiar with, like Dove, or if you're in the UK, Marmite. And those are the parts of the business that make the money. They have their own websites and they really have the power. So in the case of Unilever, they tackled this decentralization by having a central accessibility squad that those brands could draw upon to help them do good work. Another example of a company I know that's quite decentralized is AbbVie. This is a US pharmaceutical company. Now, pharmaceutical tend to be very heavily regulated, so you might think they don't have the same problem, but they're a huge business. They've got many, many different therapy areas, lots of different drugs and medical devices. And so really, just like Unilever, they suffer from the same problem that their business is lots of different people in lots of different groups in lots of different countries, and they're all trying to do their own thing. And the people at the center have difficulty sort of rolling out that centralized governance, and using the compliance stick is not always helpful. Some of the things that Maya said on the earlier slide about trying to motivate people are much more successful. And on the more centralized side, companies like BP have a much stronger central governance system. And in their case, they had a team called the Global Authority Team that had the power to close down sites and really police the web estate with a strong arm. And I know that Shell have a similarly strong governance model. And in Shell, Maya, it was the Center of Excellence that did that.
That's right. We did. We had a global team, and we really leveraged the power of the brand and the professional team there to look after our company standards and manage the central tools and platforms.
And when you have such a big web estate, so many sites and countries, it becomes a super huge challenge, and you need tools as well as people to help you do that. And I just want to scroll down and show you a tool that I have come across and know well. It's called Max. And just to give you a little flavor here, it gives you a system for keeping control of multiple sites and all the different stages of progress that they are in. And in this case, they're adhering to the ISO standard 30071-1, and that kind of thing can be really helpful to keep you on top of your progress. Yeah, so how you do it is going to some extent depend on your particular company's setup and organization. It's going to depend on your type of leaders. It's going to depend if you're B2B or B2C. But whatever it is, there's going to be a model for you, and I think you need to find that and make it work in your organization. Okay, next up, making the business case. So we agreed already, this is really a crucial bit. We need that senior leadership support. So who are we making the business case to? And what are some of the key things that we can talk to them about to unlock budget and authority and backing?
Yeah, always fun making business cases, Dan, but I already mentioned some of it, but I think revenue is always going to be a driver for companies. They exist to make profit, right? So, but if we come at it from a revenue perspective, I think speaking to marketers about expanding their market reach is really an easy win, getting them to understand that there is this 15%. It's, we can refer to WHO, so we're not making up these types of numbers. And by making something accessible, you instantly make it available to them. That's, I think a lot of budget is spent just trying to reach new people. So by following standard rules that we already know what they are, we can expand market reach by potentially up to 15%. That usually gets the attention of marketers in my experience. Um, and to other people, but also particularly procurement or HR, anything like that. I like talking about the resilience of the company. It is also about expanding the market reach, but it's also about keeping your employees happy. It's attracting new talent as well. So if the hiring practices are inclusive, that's great. But once they get into the organization, we need to make sure that all of the processes and tools support all of the employees to be productive. You've already mentioned this, and I've seen it happen where a tool that was accessible was replaced by something that unfortunately isn't. And it does impact productivity, but it also impacts morale. When suddenly something you used to be able to do by yourself, you can't anymore. And then cost control. This is one that is perhaps one of my favorites because reducing operational expenditure, controlling costs is something that I spoke a lot about. And yes, there is potentially a bit of an initial cost in training up people to understand how to design inclusively. But once you do that, you can really track this by tracking the number of bugs related to accessibility, or how long it takes to remediate something, or how many bugs go to production. And speaking to designers and developers about problem solving and these challenges that we're trying to overcome, that is, in my experience, a lot of fun. They love solving problems. That's why they get into what they do. And then we talk to the product owners about looking at those metrics and really making things more efficient.
Yeah, and I think, one of the issues that I see in what I would describe as the traditional accessibility industry is all the talk is about compliance and legislation, and it's all sort of wielding the big stick. And okay, that can work, but really, I think we're better off talking about the benefits and the good stuff. Revenue, of course, increased reach. Um, Helping your employees do better, attracting better employees, as you've said. But I just focus on one of the things on the cost control side, going back to that earlier slide where I said many organizations have got way more websites than they even know about. I mean, they're probably paying to maintain those websites. They might be paying an agency a retainer fee. They're certainly paying for the domain name renewal, the hosting, and all that. you probably don't need a lot of these websites anymore. So just doing some kind of audit and maybe getting rid of a half or more of them is actually just going to save a whole bunch of money. And it's going to reduce the size of the problem that you have, and it's going to reduce your risk your risk surface area as well. So lots of good reasons to make to different people in the business. I saw a great article. If I scroll down, um, McKinsey published this article just in the last week or two, where it's called "The CEO as Chief Resilience Officer." So I would recommend you look that up because that's a pretty good read if you're trying to make some arguments to the senior people in your organization. Okay. This one, perfection is a myth. Maya, do you want to say a few words about perfection?
Yes, and I don't want this to discourage anybody. Perfection is a myth, but to encourage everyone to keep chipping away and making those improvements. It's accessibility isn't a one and done. It's something that we're continuously designing things to be inclusive. And as I already mentioned, with all of the campaigns that are being launched, all of the content updates that are going out there, something's always being updated somewhere. I had a very enlightening and humbling discussion with somebody many, many years ago because I went down that path of using a big stick and talking about, it has to be compliant, it has to be 100%. And this very, very kind person said, Maya, I love that you're fighting the good fight and you're trying to make everything perfect, but you don't have to. I don't need it to be perfect. I just need it to work for me. And it took a little while for that message to sink in. But what I understood was uh, it's about making things adaptable and flexible. They work with their tools and they know what works for them. If I just give that leeway and speak to people about the problems that we're trying to solve, they're going to come up with better solutions than I would anyway. And with everything that's also being updated with the tooling, it's just not my role to police. It's my role to point out the hurdles and for us to work on different paths around them.
Yeah, and just peeking down here at the bottom, I want to show you just this maturity model from an organization I know well and work with called Accessible Brands. And it really explains that this is a journey. And if I reveal it, what companies really want to do is achieve growth and transform the brand and the customer experience. And they're probably somewhere down here. They're non-compliant in terms of accessibility and digital inclusion, or they're sort of trapped in this sort of we've got to be 100%, we've got to achieve these targets, we've got to use these sort of fixed tools and methods. So a lot of companies are right here now. But by adopting some of the practices that we're talking about in this video and embedding them into the organization, that's really what's going to lead to the growth and to the transformational brand and customer experience, and finally release you to innovate. And just to name check those companies again, Apple, Google, Microsoft, they have done amazing work at building accessibility into their operating systems. So this stuff is available for everyone. And there's a reason they're doing it, and it's not purely altruistic. They want more people using their products. So just remember, this kind of journey is one you need to be going on and heading towards innovation. It's not just about compliance. Okay, we're reaching the end, but we couldn't get to the end of any presentation without talking about artificial intelligence. So, Maya, how do you feel that artificial intelligence might help or perhaps hinder the situation and the issues that we've been talking about?
I think AI has a lot of potential, and we're starting to see that, but I think it has potential for harm and for good. in my experience, again, I'm no expert, but it's been great at binary decisions. Does element X exist? And it can do that faster and at a volume that I simply couldn't keep up with. But I've played with ChatGPT for many hours, and I've been very frustrated by its inability to keep context in mind, no matter how many instructions and things I give it. Um, so yeah, it's just something I think we have to remember when we're playing with well, when we're using these new tools. It's just not quite there yet. But I think that AI is also to talk about scale when we talk about AI. With the proliferation of content and the continuous code releases, there are so many new tools popping up every day that help us produce those content. AI is amazing at that, and I use it myself. But the biases that we have and that context, again, it really can take quite a bit of effort to get what I want out of it and to ensure that there's not something I'm overlooking and something I'm trying to make inclusive is excluding someone just because I haven't thought about it. So yes, I do think AI can help make things more inclusive. And I do believe that AI being integrated into these auditing tools can help a lot. But I think we're going to need humans and people working together with AI to make sure that what we're building and creating truly is inclusive.
Absolutely. I think we're going to see a lot of good stuff happening. It seems to get better and better every week, and we'll watch the space with interest, but do not rely on it solely. We humans still have our role to play. And picking back up on the phrase you used earlier, this is a team sport, and it's all about the people and governance in particular that I keep banging on about. That is very much about the people in the organization as well. So let's use the tools, but let's work with the people, and I'm sure things will get better over time. Okay, bringing it to an end, let's just run through the top takeaways. We've talked about the shift from accessibility, or talking about accessibility as a technical thing and a compliance thing, to inclusive design and design for all, and this shift left type of concept. We have talked about closing the governance gap and actually trying to get on top of the scale of the challenge and involve all our colleagues across our organizations, whatever their role or function, and in particular, involving the leadership. And remembering that we're not going to achieve 100% compliance or perfection. It's all about continuous improvement. It's a journey. That journey is going to depend on your organization and your leaders, but you got to try and move it forward. And Maya and I would love to help you and your organizations. If you want to have a conversation like this one with us, maybe a lunch and learn, get in touch and book a session with us. We'd be happy to work with you to do a talk like this within your organizations. Our contact details are right there on the screen. But I want to give Maya the last word. I want her just say a few words about humanizing the mission.
Oh, um, well, if I talk about that, I would share my one wish, which is if there's one thing that I'd want people to walk away with from this, it's to remember that there's a person on the other end, and your exact why will be yours and yours alone. But if we remember that there's an individual who's trying to use our product and we're creating an experience for them, whether it's good or bad, it will be an experience. Then I think that gives us that North Star to work towards. And yeah, that's what guides my direction. And I hope it can help guide yours as well.
Thank you so much, Maya, for sharing all of this great experience. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please do get in touch with us if you've got any questions, and we hope we can give you some good advice to move your own accessibility or inclusivity journey forward. Bye for now.